Welcome to the Upside Podcast, powered by Upside Global and hosted by Julian Blinn, founder and CEO of Upside Global. The Upside Podcast is listened to weekly by over 6,000 sports and tech executives from all sports leagues and teams in the United States and around the world. Julian has been developing technologies for professional sports teams for over 10 years and has worked for major tech companies along with sports tech startups. In each episode, Julian interviews global leaders in sports to share knowledge on emerging technology in the sports industry and how these technologies can help improve the performance of individuals and organizations, both on and off the playing field. And now here's your host, Julian Blinn.
So today we have the honor of interviewing a group of MLB practitioners, including Dr. Z, that are experts in mental performance and preparation. So first we have Lindsay Shaw, who is the Director of Sports Psychology for the Guardians and MLB team. So Lindsay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Julian. Thanks for having me. Nice
to see you. It's great to have you back. And then we have Zach Brendan, who is the Head of Mental Performance and Coach Development for the Arizona Diamondbacks and the MLB team. So Zach, welcome back to the show as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Julian.
No problem. It's great to have you back. And then we have Josh Kozuch, who is the mental performance coach for the Baltimore Orioles and MLB team. So Josh, welcome back as well.
Thanks, Julian. Happy to be back.
Great. It's great to have you back as well. And then we have a new participant, Dr. Len Zaichkowsky, PhD. So Len, for some of you who may not know, is the world-class expert in biofeedback, psychology, cognitive fitness. He's worked with teams over the years in the NBA, the NHL, in Europe. So Len, welcome back as well.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So hey guys, I'm going to jump right into the topics and the questions. So because there's a lot to cover today. So the first question for you guys is, looking back at your career, what is one major misconception you had about mental performance in pro baseball that you've seen completely change your mind about? And what was the catalyst for that shift in perspective? That's the first question. And then conversely, what's been the most consistently rewarding aspect of your job that keeps you passionate about helping the elite athletes? Anybody wants to start? Anybody?
Who's going to bat lead off here?
Yes. I was going to say I'll end the polite game here. All right. Well, I finished grad school in 2010 with Len Zaichkowsky, and I got my first job with the Olympic Committee. So it wasn't in Major League Baseball. I've been working for the Guardians this is my 5th year now. Yep. I think I was appropriately intimidated when I joined the Olympic Committee. These are some of the best athletes in the world. And I was Division I athlete, but what do I know? And I think I soon realized that obviously I wasn't a sport coach, but I had appropriate expertise from years of graduate school and applied experiences with Len and other professors to help athletes understand parts of themselves or parts of where they are in their own development, inside their mind, where they're getting in their own way, or how they're secret or surprising themselves, and how that can interfere with their performance. And over time I got skillful at that, and so the transition into baseball, I'm not sure I had major misconceptions, and I think sort of linked to that, one of the most satisfying things in this work is to really so athletes in any sport, they get really, really good at what they're doing. But what's the cost? Well, they forego other opportunities, other appropriate academic opportunities. My dog is helping me here. Yeah. Social things, just developing other skills, learning basic skills, right? So they have these, in certain areas are super well developed, and then other areas are perhaps less well developed. So to build a relationship with someone, to understand who they are, what are their strengths and their areas of opportunities, and then to be along, to join them on their journey. It's seriously a privilege. So I don't think I'll ever tire of that.
That's great. Well, thank you, Lindsay. Great feedback. Anybody else? George, Zach, Len, any thoughts?
Similar to the rewarding piece for me too, is right. You're on this journey to help these players and coaches get to where they want to be. And they've had this lifelong dream to be there. It's cool to be a small part. Even if it's 0.1%, it's cool to know, or when that player reaches out and he's like, hey, thanks for that conversation we had back in 2021, and I don't even remember the conversation, but it stuck with the player. Like those things are really cool. The misconception piece, similar to Lindsay's, and my journey was I played baseball. I played in college, did not play professionally. And then I went back to grad school. And then my first job out of grad school was in professional baseball. So I had this notion or misconception already that guys are going to be out on this stuff, right? Like they're not talking about mental skills or they don't need that type of thing. And a lot of it was because of just how it had been for me as a player, and the players that I was around and the coaches that I was also around. And I remember thinking like very similar. Who am I to come out of grad school and tell these guys in A ball like this is what you need to do when I didn't even play there myself, right? I wasn't good enough talent wise to play there. So how am I supposed to help these guys? But I think overcoming some of those misconceptions and thoughts of my own has been a big part. And really there's just been a willingness of players to open up and have some of these conversations. So a lot of it was just made up in my own head. Once they see who you are and how you do things, they're open to a lot of that. And that's obviously evolved even more over the years, but that's probably been the biggest misconception for myself.
And would you say that the people skills are probably the biggest skills you can have as a mental coach, or no?
They're very important. I don't know if they're the most important because you need to be competent in what you do and the information that you bring to your teams. But the people skills are what are going to get your foot in the door and get those conversations started and building that trust that you ultimately need to do the job well. So I think it's a combination of both, but I think that's a really important piece. Is it the most? I don't know, but it's a big part.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Josh. Zach or Len, any thoughts on that?
I'll jump in with the misconception piece, and I don't know if misconception is the right description for this because I don't think this is necessarily faulty thinking because there's a lot of people in our profession who do really wonderful work focus on this. But I think one misconception that I may have had when I started was the notion that I felt like the best work had to be done through players directly and just doing one-on-one kind of service provision for the players themselves. And although I do still certainly believe that that's really important, something that we talk a little bit about is that, you know, there's the individual and the environment that ultimately drives results and performance. And so the environment, to me, nobody plays a bigger role in that than coaches. And I think what we've seen is we have a lot of coaches who are really well equipped to have an impact in this space. Some of them are very good mental coaches. Some of them have a lot of potential to become really good mental coaches with us. And so I think, again, I don't know if misconception is the right word, but I think a shift for me has been working to and through coaches a little bit more in my service provision as well, and trying to amplify the impact. I use like a basketball analogy a lot where I tell coaches, like, I don't need to be the leading scorer with players. Like, I don't need to be the one that scores every, all the buckets. I'm happy to pass out assists and like create opportunities for other coaches, other staff to quote unquote score. Now, I think there still comes a point as a mental performance coach where in certain cases, like, you have to be the one that delivers. You have to be the one where you have to rely on your expertise, your training, and your judgment. And I think a shift though has been viewing our work as more of a facilitator through coaches at times. So that's a misconception. And then I think on part two, I think one thing that's really fun is being part of the behind the scenes journey of these players. Like my first year my first draft class that I was part of was 2019. And we have a lot of those players that have now made it to the big leagues. It's been very cool to see some of them, find significant others, get married, have kids, not only make their baseball dream come true, but to see their growth and maturation off the field as well. I think that that's a very cool thing to be part of and just kind of see, behind the scenes as well. So that to me has been a rewarding piece.
That's great. Thank you, Zach. Len, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously,
Well, yeah, batting cleanup here. Like most people know, I've been in this business a long time, like over 50 years. And right from my very first year, I don't know if the misconception, I agree with what the others have been saying, that the misconception was I expected them to know a lot more about the mental skills area, the cognitive area. And they just weren't educated. And it took me a while to figure that out, that they need a lot of mentoring. Uh, so that's kind of one area that I expected more things, but it's changed over time, and it's kind of universal across all sports. Uh, that there's been so much of a focus on the physical attributes of whatever the sport might be, whether it's hockey or baseball, basketball. It doesn't seem to matter. There's such an emphasis, and perhaps incorrectly, on the physical dimension, rather than what I'm seeing happening in the last couple of years is kind of a turn towards the cognitive domain. And I know Julian, in one of your earlier podcasts with Mr. Robbins and others, that they said that the thing that they're kind of most disappointed in is the lack of growth in what we're all working in the cognitive domain. And I agree wholeheartedly. We just haven't figured out how to have them value cognition and cognitive performance.
are you referring to also the importance of leadership skills development that you're referring to as well, or just?
Well, that's a part of it. Leadership, yeah, the leadership part is part of it. But what was mentioned by your other panel members is the focus on training coaches to be doing a lot of what we do is absolutely the right thing to do. I know for the last decade working in the National Hockey League, most of my work is with the coaches, training them to kind of do a lot of what we do, because it's going to have a greater impact. Like many of you say, we haven't played at that elite level. Most of the coaches have, and they've got a little more credibility. And if we can teach them these skills, and they can transfer on to the players that they're trying to develop, they're most grateful. Most of them really are avid learners and want to learn. So I give them stuff. I give some lectures, but mostly short reading articles that I know that they can grab onto and share with the players.
That
So
makes sense.
I think that's you're all doing the right thing at this point in your career. Focusing on working with coaches.
That's great. No, that makes sense. Now, second question is, baseball, obviously, and I think, Lindsay, you kind of touched on that the last time, but baseball is obviously a game of immense failure, right? You're not going to hit all those balls all the time, so with even the best players failing more often than they succeed, how do you help players not just cope with failure, but actually leverage it as a catalyst for growth and resilience, transforming setbacks into learning opportunities? Anybody wants to start?
Well, I think giving examples, yeah, and, when you're talking about, it's even rare to find a 300 hitter today, but you're failing most of the time. But you can provide many current and past examples of players who started off slow with a high failure rate and just developed their skill set, and look what they're doing now. I was just watching some MLB games this weekend, and some players just came out of nowhere, and
Mhm.
they spent years in failure, even in the minor leagues.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you, Len. Anybody else on that failure, how to deal with it?
I think what Dr. Zaichkowsky just kind of brought up is really good. I think this was maybe a month or two ago. Speaking of notable former players, there was a viral clip speech from Derek Jeter, who's obviously had a very storied career in this game, and he gave a commencement address at the University of Michigan. And one of the snippets within the conversation, he talked a little bit about the importance of how everybody needs to learn how to deal with failure, and how without, like, it's hard to have success without iterations of failure. And I'm probably going to butcher how he said this, but it was something to the effect of, like, you have to make sure that failure doesn't become a road. It's a speed bump, but not a roadblock. It was some iteration of that, if you will. And I really like that, because I think it sets it up for two reasons. One thing that will break down kind of failure, like if you, I kind of view it like, okay, failure in the outcome is an event, but there's two other E's on the front end and on the back end that determine how that shapes you and how you grow from it. On the front end, your expectations matter. So your expectations going into it, like, is there an understanding, like, yes, this game is challenging. Yes, it's difficult. To Derek Jeter's point, like, we can all expect that at some point we are going to fail. We're going to be challenged. If you think your path to the big leagues is going to be linear, I think most people will be very disappointed. There's a lot of speed bumps and things along the way. So your expectations are going to influence the event itself and how you feel about failure. But then on the back end of it, after the event, your explanations matter. So how you describe your lessons, how you describe the outcomes and your results, because I think what we know in this game is sometimes the box score doesn't tell the whole story. You can have a game where it's 0 for 4 as a hitter, and yet we know that if you actually peel back the layers, like, there could be a lot of small wins and process-oriented subtle wins in that, in your performance and stuff. So I think part of our job in mental performance, again, coaches and so on, is to really help players understand, like, how to be intentional with their expectations on the front end, knowing that, like, in a season, there's going to be seasons within that. Like, you're going to have seasons within a year of struggle. You're going to have seasons of success. You're going to have seasons of and anything in between. And so your expectations matter. And then on the back end, how you choose to explain your failures, describe them, I think plays a really pivotal part in, can you then use them as a catalyst for growth?
No,
Thanks
great.
for bringing that up, Zach. That speech by Jeter was fantastic, and every organization and every sport should listen to that. And I had a long relationship. I don't know if many of you know that, but the book I wrote, The Playmaker's Advantage, was Derek Jeter, who bought the contract. He was working for Simon and Schuster at the time after retired from the Yankees. So I had some initial correspondence with him. He liked what I had to say about this whole area. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, you guys got to send me I haven't seen the speech, so.
Oh,
So,
it's a year old now. It was done
Oh,
at
is it?
I think it was at Cornell University.
Okay,
Graduation speech, yeah.
I'll look it up.
I'll send it
Josh,
to you, yeah.
that's great. Thank you. Josh or Lindsay, any thoughts on that, on failure, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were talking about this last time, we were talking about like failure in at bat, right? Or just like very specifically your batting average. And obviously baseball has a lot of other metrics that are used to assess or evaluate players. So I think if you're talking about an at bat, that kind of alluded to this, you can decompose it. So like our hitting coaches will say to a player, like, this is kind of what we expect, to Zach's point, like, these are your strengths and this is what you should wait for. So there is this like real art for the player, like, to get comfortable, like, wait for the right pitch. You might have to wait. I mean, we might be like 10 pitches in or something like that, to wait for the pitcher to give you the thing that you can do some damage with. And I mean, the same thing for pitchers. Like one of the most beautiful things that like a pitcher can say is like, I got to the point with the hitter where I was ready to like give him my best stuff and like put it right down the middle. And if the hitter makes contact, like, kind of good for him. That was a really good hit. It was a really good pitch and it was a really good hit. So like you can put into your mind that there is this, I don't want to like cat and mouse game out there. And so like sometimes the thing that, as you know, as the pitcher that you didn't want to happen is going to happen, but you incorporate that, like, that's part of the job. It's part of the game. I think if you're thinking about failure as was the player not promoted right from AA to AAA, or was he released prior to what he wanted, or did he sustain a career-ending injury, or did he, whatever. Insert storyline here, and then am I a failure as a human being? And I think there's like a whole piece where you step back from it, and again, like, look at your life, look what you've accomplished, look for your goals, were the goals appropriate? Part of it's going to be in your control, part of it's not going to be in your control, but helping people, again, to Zach's point, make sense of like where they are in their own story can be pretty powerful.
And would you say that the best athletes in the world, whether it's baseball, hockey, basketball, have the one that have the ability to forget failures quickly and reset?
You hope. And part of that is that they've engaged in like this really deliberate practice of saying like, okay, this is what happened. Either he beat me, that was the bet. Like I did my best, and his best just like he outpaced me, right? Okay, so like, we can't really count that as a failure. When I was at the Olympic Committee working with athletes like who were in second place or fourth place, right? Whereas it was really interesting in how they made sense of it on their own. So you can assist someone to make sure that they're actually being pretty honest in their sense making, and often often immediately they're not, right? And like that story can live on in their mind, and then they get like embarrassed or shameful, and then they don't want to think about it because they think that it reveals this like deeper truth about who they are and what they're capable of. And sometimes that's really false and it's really damaging. So if you can kind of like get them to go back and reconstruct the narrative, that can be really helpful. But to your point, can people rapidly forget? Yeah, right. So like a pitcher is out there and, first hitter of the game, first pitch, like, he hits a bomb, home run. Okay, here we go. So he's got to like rapidly acknowledge, okay, that happened. Was there something that I did that I could modify, be in contact with, with the catcher, and then like, reset, refocus, and let it rip. But like that is a skill set that can be developed over time. But
That's
yeah,
great to hear. So
I was thinking about the last home run when you're getting ready, and it's often when your mind's like jumping around, like here I am, and that just happened, like that, you're opening yourself up for some variability in the way you're going to execute the motor movement. And like, of course, maybe something suboptimal is going to happen.
But I'm guessing that some players have this natural ability maybe to forget faster than others, right?
And I would say they're like low grade, less neurotic, right? They can, they're like less self-conscious. They kind of like shrug their shoulders and move on. Yeah. And I think that maps on to different personality constructs.
Makes sense. Thank you, Lindsay. Josh, for your thoughts on that failure?
I think, okay, with baseball, you hear a lot, like you're going to fail 3 times out. Everybody hears that. And as a player, and sometimes as a coach too, you kind of accept the fact that it's going to happen. It's almost like inevitable. Mm-hmm. It almost feels like you don't have control, right? Like I'm ultimately going to fail. And where I try to come in, or at least reframe some of the thinking, is like, what can we control? So it becomes like you have a choice. What are you going to do about it when you do fail? That's a question I often ask players. Like, you gave up a home run. What are you going to do about it? What's the next pitch going to be? You got sent down. What are you going to do about it? You didn't get called up. What are you going to do about it? You got traded. What are you going to do about it? And try to give them that sense of control and that action of, okay, I can take back some of the failure happened. I know it's inevitable, but what are the next steps going to be? I think what happens is when players get frozen, where it's like, I don't know what to do next, or I knew this failure was going to happen, but I'm not quite sure what those next steps are. That's when it's really tough to be able to deal with. You use examples of Navy SEALs often a lot when it comes to resiliency and those types of things. But I also think that it's important to take in like real life examples, maybe that they've either seen in their own lives, whether it's raised by a single parent or they know somebody that overcame cancer, these types of things, and trying to take from other examples of not necessarily failure, but resiliency of you've seen these things happen. How have these people responded? And try to tie it a little bit into that and just get away from that like baseball identity a little bit more has helped. And then I also think as mental skills coaches, it's important to have conversations with players, not just when they're failing, but also when they're having success. Because in this field, if you're only and always talking to players when they're struggling, well, players are going to avoid you because it's like, well, Josh only comes up to me when stuff's going wrong. why do I want to talk to him there? So I think that's important to know in this field as well. Is like, we're not just there to help when it's failing. We're also there to and should be helping to have these conversations when players are having success, because success leaves clues. And if we can pick up some of these clues, then when they do fail, we can go back to that. And it ends up being just this, I think, a little bit better way of trying to do this work.
It's a great point. Yeah. Because every time they see when they're failing, then trying to avoid you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so
I just want to loop back with something that you said that links to what Zach and Led had said before. Okay, so coaches are around, or I mean, at least for me in my role, the coaches are around more than I am, right? Or like they're like in the cages or on the mound or in the bullpen, right? They're like there, right? And there's only one of you. So there's ways that you can I think draw attention to, and maybe it's like, okay, so put a pitcher's getting pulled out of the game, things aren't going well, he's or pitch counts high, he's getting pulled out, and maybe he gets into the dugout and he smashes a couple things. Like maybe this is potentially an undesirable kind of response. So then when he's calmer, you can say like, oh, okay, I get it. But like, let's think about all the guys that have pulled out of games, and let's put you in a position where you can actually at the right time think about what was going on, what you can modify. But so you can not behave. I mean, sometimes you can behaviorally rehearse, but you can talk about what is a more optimal response in the face of failure, right? So you can talk to the player about it. You can talk to the coaches about it. The coaches can reinforce it. And I had this funny interaction recently with a pitcher where he said to me, like, okay, I know the mound as it comes. All right. And all right, the mound as it's coming again. I know I'm getting pulled out. And in my mind, I said to myself, I can keep my head high, knowing that I put out some good stuff. It wasn't all my best and I have things to work on, or I can get into the dugout and I can really mess some things up, and I will do the former, right? Like, so there's ways that knowing that there's going to be a lot of speed bumps, we're in this role where we can help people say like, you have a choice now, right? And what is the kind of like player or person or human being, who do you want to be? If you're a father or a husband, like you representing your family, who do you want to be? And like allow them to rise to the occasion when the occasion presents themselves, and then, I mean, that's another back to the satisfying component where you can sort of forecast this stuff's going to come up. How do you want to respond? You can bring the attention for the players and the coaches so they're ready when it happens.
So a quick follow-up on that, just from my own knowledge, because I don't work in the MLB, right? But during a game, an MLB game, and you see a pitcher or a hitter struggling, do you as a mental coach have the ability to go in there in the dugout and talk to the players, or you're just not allowed?
I'm not in the dugout.
So Zach and I are both in the dugout, and I'm probably not going up to the player in that moment, just based on the situation and obviously cameras and those types of things in the major league environment. I think it's something that I've found is best to be handled after the game or even the next day.
Makes sense. Same with Zach. Okay. Hey, next question I want to ask you is, so obviously the journey, right, from amateur to professional baseball, particularly through the minor leagues, and it's a significant mental gauntlet. It's a big step, right? Some players were quite successful, I guess, in the minor league, and then they don't quite always become successful in the major league, right? So what are the unique psychological challenges that you observe in players making the transition, and how do you prepare them for the emotional and mental demands of the minor leagues grind and the eventual leap to the major leagues? It's a big step, right? Some guys may not be able to make it,
Yeah, it is a big step, Julian. You still have to remind them that it's still a game of baseball that they were playing when they were kids.
Yeah.
Then they're usually pretty damn good at it. And nothing has really changed. What has perhaps changed is the velocity of the baseball and learning to catch up with, consistently high 90s and 100-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah.
That's different. And likewise with the breaking ball. But the rest of playing the game, it's pretty straightforward. It hasn't changed a whole lot. And so you just have to, at least I've tried to remind them that play it like you did when you were a kid. Enjoy it. Have fun.
Because sometimes they lose the passion. They lose the having fun. It's all, So makes sense. Thank you, Len.
Zach kind of touched on this when he said the part that he enjoys, but these young men are also growing as humans. They're in relationships. They may be getting married. They might be having kids. So on top of trying to make your way up through the minor leagues, you have life happening at the same time, which is very challenging. And a lot of times these players are coming from towns or cities across the world where they may be the only one to have ever done this journey. So they don't have a whole lot to pull from, or a lot of people in their circle that they can go to and have these conversations with. So what I think is helpful, or what I've seen in the past, is just having some of your big league players talk to minor leaguers in spring training, or taking stories that are happening throughout a major league season and being able to share some of those things with minor league players, just so they understand that I'm not the only one going through this. I'm not the only one that has experienced this. And this is what some people in the past have done to kind of navigate some of this. And so I think that helps, one, give them that understanding that I'm not alone. Other people have done this, and I'm going to be able to. And I also think it helps build relationships that way with some young players, with some veteran players. So I think that the more that you can do those types of things and try to not necessarily normalize, but show them that you're not the first one to go through some of this stuff, I think I've seen and had some success with.
That's great. No, great point. Having the veteran players talk to the younger ones, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure it helps. Anybody had any other comments on that?
That was well said.
That's great. Hey, the next question is, and I think, Josh, you got to go at 12 o'clock. So obviously at the end of the month, right, there's a trade deadline, right? So my question to you guys is, how do you, to what extent are you guys involved when it comes to things like trades, right? Do you help them to evaluate, assess some players? How much involvement do you have to be for like things like the trades and the trade deadline?
Well, I personally try not to get involved in those kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
They're rather high-risk things. There may be a casual conversation with the general manager or with the coach, but I try to, by and large, stay out of that, because if the word gets out that you're involved in that decision making, another reason for players and coaches to avoid you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That makes sense. Anybody has any other comments, Josh, Zach, or Lindsay, about your involvement?
Not involved with the decision-making process, more involved with the boots on the ground type of thing, where it's just the conversations with players and coaches. Because you see X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, you see the internet, you're asked constantly by the media about the rumors, all these things coming up. Well, you still have a game to play that night. And ultimately, your job is to go out there and perform, whether there's rumors or not. That being said, it's really freaking hard to do. So that's a lot of the conversations just with the players and coaches. It's just that present moment focus. And it usually happens with teams that maybe haven't had the start or 100 games to the season that they would have liked. We haven't had the start that we would have liked to the season, so there's a lot of rumors swirling around right now. But it's part of the game and it's part of the business side, and guys understand that, but it doesn't make it easier. So not involved with the business decisions, more involved with the on-field. How do we still perform and try to win games tonight?
That's great. Makes sense. Zach or Lindsay, any comment on that trade deadline?
Yeah.
Are you guys involved in that?
Yeah, I'll just say, thankfully, not involved at all in the decision-making part, which I would want no part of. I think, one thing that we will talk about, not just as it relates to trades, but even within the concept of player development and baseball ops, is like our job as coaches and staff on the field is like, we're about development, not evaluation. Like our job isn't to play that role. We have other experts and other people in the organization who can play that role far better than I can. And I think Josh said it really well, that one, not involved, thankfully, but also two, like the effect of that on a player's mental and emotional health is very real too. Like you're talking about, this kind of ties into the last question about what are some of the challenges across different levels. And I think part of it is like just the livelihood piece of it and the family separation. Like you have players potentially being like, I might all of a sudden not be with my family, and my family, like, we love it here. My kids love it here. My wife loves it here. My wife has a community amongst the other wives in the group. Like, all of those little details are really meaningful to people. And I think that's the thing that, as a quick aside, this doesn't tie exactly to trades, but I have to like grit my teeth when I have like people that don't work in baseball who are like the average fan, and like we'll be in town playing whatever their hometown team is, and they'll shoot me a text like, "Hey, we got you guys, tonight," or like, they'll send some like playful message. And like, I think what gets lost to the average fan is like, I might have just seen a player like lose his job. Like, I might have just seen a player get designated for assignment, get sent down. He's now all of a sudden, like, not only not in the big leagues anymore, but now he's got to tell his family, like, hey, I'm not coming home on this road trip. I'm now going to AAA or whatever the case might be. So I think Josh said it really well, that all those factors are very much meaningful pieces that can shape a player's mental and emotional and spiritual health. So anyway, I think that's where our role and support is most needed.
No, great
Great.
point.
Yeah.
Yep. Lindsay, any thoughts on that as well? No? Okay. Hey, next question I want to ask you is going back to pressure, right? The pressure to perform. So the pressure to perform in the MLB is immense, right? Careers are short. So to what extent do you think that the relentless pursuit of peak performance, often at any cost, sometimes contribute to player mental health struggles rather than solely alleviating them? And are there systematic aspects of MLB culture that needs to be fundamentally changed to better support player well-being? That's a tough question, I know, but broad question too. Yeah.
I mean, I think if we zoom out from baseball specifically, and we think about anyone who wants to be among the best of the best in their specific craft, whether it's another sport, another, medicine, the law, or whatever it is, be an astronaut, it requires a type of dedication to get that good, right? So like, I mean, hopefully you have, and I know, Len, you know way more about this, but hopefully you have the right genes and the right early exposure and the right training experience, and here you are, and you're at like some developmental arc in your life, and you're among the best in your country or internationally. There's a cost to that. And usually what I see is that there was a way of, we'll talk about the player specifically. There's a way that the player has learned to work with himself that worked on his rise, right? Like to be like relentless and demanding and, intolerant of mistakes. And like, there's this like harsh voice within him. And like, sometimes it's like, you learn that from your parents or early coaches, or some people they just learn like, wow, when I really treat myself this way, I produce more. Okay, well, like, great. And maybe that facilitates your rise. But at some point, if you want to have longevity in, being among the best of the best, like that, I mean, that's where I see problems occur. That like, at first it'll rob you of like the love of the game. You'll start to like be kind of like adversarial with yourself inside yourself. You cause problems in relationships, right? Your family's saying like, look, so yeah, I mean, I think the studies have mixed data as to whether dual elite athletes have, are they more vulnerable, or do they have more protective factors for pervasive mental health conditions? And I would say, in my experience, there's different kinds of stressors that they're exposed to, right? The demands are different, right? So like playing in front of 40,000 people, failing in front of 40,000 people, having the media and all these people, like, it's Zach saying like, happy and chirping about, that's something that like, I don't have to experience. I don't deal with in my day-to-day life. I mean, there's also a lot of like privileges that come with it, but I think that the one point of vulnerability is this stuff that you learn along the way with like your actual working relationship with yourself can open you up. And then, insert someone who has experience, either as a mental performance coach or a psychologist, can help athletes with that, so they can, stay at the top, have more longevity, and then like actually let themselves enjoy it.
No, all great points. Anybody else have any
No,
thoughts?
that was well said, Linda. Well done.
It's great. Thank you, Len. Zach or Josh, any thoughts on that as well?
I'll just speak to baseball as a system right now. I think they've done a good job the last few years of trying to build out mental health departments, mental skills, mental performance departments, not just hiring one person to cover an entire organization, which is how it seems like it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, which now you look at it and you're like, man, that was crazy that they even tried to do some of that stuff. So I think baseball has done a nice job. I'm not saying it's the right way, but I think they're trying, or certain teams are trying to not necessarily split the work, but provide the resources for the players and coaches. I think that there's plenty of work to go around for everyone, whether it is a mental performance coach, a mental health professional. I think you can have multiple of them within organizations. I think teams are getting to that point now, which is really cool to see. I can't speak to other sports as well, but just systemically from a baseball perspective, I think they're doing a good job with that. I'm just curious to see how it goes in the future, but that's how I'll speak on that.
It's great. Yeah, makes sense. Zach, any thoughts on that as well? No. Okay. So, guys, I got two more questions. I know we got 10 minutes. The first one is about, seeking mental health support is a sign of weakness, lack of maybe mental toughness. Is the next one. Or we can go into with the significant financial stakes involved in MLB, do you have a kind of situation where external pressure, family agents, right, can make it difficult? So which one would you like me to ask you guys? Because you got one more. Any preferences? No preferences? Okay. Maybe I'll ask you the next one, right? So in a highly competitive environment, there can be a perception that seeking mental health support is a sign of weakness or lack of mental toughness. So how do you actively combat this deeply ingrained stigma, particularly among veteran players or those from more traditional baseball backgrounds who may be resistant to embracing mental performance strategies? Because I'm sure it happens, right?
I mean, I can start. One of the things that we've noticed is, okay, so like starting with the NCAA, I mean, Josh, you were kind of alluding to this, like MLB has changed. So I don't know, when was it 2005 that the NCAA started to, put their position paper out on like mental health and, sort of like laid out, like what should mental health service provision look, not just like so student athletes can go to the student counseling center, but somehow embed mental health service provision within athletics, right? And then so the trend has grown from there. I mean, again, at the Olympic Committee for, decades before I spent my decade there, there was psychologists traveling the world with athletes, like just in case something happened, but focused on performance. But then also they had the training. Like if you're at some very remote location, you gotta be trained to make an assessment of like, what should we really do here?
Yeah.
But so anyway, so this trend is now it went from like, the big schools, the big D1 schools to now like, Division 2, Division 3, it's certainly within the NBA, NFL, all right, NHL, here we go. So, but as we're drafting players who have been in the college environment 3 years, or even many high schools, there's more conversation around mental health. I mean, everyone experienced the pandemic. This talking about like, how was I living through the pandemic? How did I function? What, the uptick in anxiety, depression, and all this sort of stuff. So I think there's just been this like, sort of normalizing that we're going to talk about it, and we're going to like assess it at certain points. We'll do just sort of these mental health screeners to help us understand who might want to seek services internally, or how can we find you services outside of the club, and what, and we'll educate the player on like what are his options and what's the best thing. So I don't want to say stigma doesn't exist, because I mean, certainly, I mean, like players will sometimes say to me like, I've never talked to a psychologist. My family told me that like I couldn't do that. That was, so there are components of our culture where talking about what's going on in your mind can be, considered a weakness. But I think, at least in my experience, guys come in and they, participate in their screeners, and they're willing to talk about, and I don't want to say like I mean, if we're talking about mental health, which is like, you're experiencing these symptoms and it's interfering with your function and you have a diagnosis. I mean, that's pretty infrequent in my experience, but it's more of like, this is how I'm getting in my way. I want to be my best. I don't want to say one shot. I mean, hopefully you have, the opportunity for some resilience here, but like, this is your journey. This is your career. Why not free yourself up? Why not know yourself? Why not develop more effective strategies and coping when you're too harsh on yourself, or you're feeling kind of, your preparation is like led into anxiety, or you're losing control of your emotions or things like that. Or, you pull yourself apart after not having the performance you want. Like, why not invest in that? To Len's point earlier, as your body was growing, you invested many of your waking hours in developing your physical capacity. And now that your mind is like headed towards completion and development, why not get to know yourself? So I think like to me, that's a more interesting conversation than like who suffers from what diagnosis and how does it, I mean, certainly that's a real thing. And people with mental health diagnoses, they need help. They can still play at very high levels. Without help, they're probably not going to play at a high level for long. But with help, and I've supported athletes who have, been in and out of inpatient care, and they've still been able to be among the best. But it takes a skillful team to do that.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's certain environment, depending on the team, right, when they try to facilitate that types of support, and maybe there's some other team environment where it's harder, maybe to have this types of mental support. I don't know. But anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was a good historical description, Lindsay, of the evolution of the destigmatization of mental health in the high performance world. It kind of started at the collegiate level and at the Olympic level for sure, but now it's into the pros. And I'd like to add one other thing. The other thing that's really kind of happened is that a lot of elite performers at the highest level have spoken about their struggles with mental health.
Mhm.
And by coming out and making it public, I think has opened it up for everybody else to say, yeah, it's okay to talk about these kinds of things. So I think that's been a positive transformation as well.
Anywhere from like Michael Phelps to other
Yes.
athletes, right? Yeah. Yep. Definitely. And it brings more awareness about what you guys do, right? Obviously, the importance
Yeah.
of it. Any other comments on that?
I would just say there's a lot of good offerings from everything. We even touched on this in our previous recording and conversation that more and more players are coming into professional baseball with exposure to working with mental performance coaches, sports psychologists, clinicians, and so on. And I think that's really helping in a lot of ways. To Dr. Zaichkowsky's point, I remember last year when we did our new draft camp, it was like in the midst of like the Olympic Games, and Noah Lyles won the gold medal in this incredible finish at the 100-meter sprint. What was really cool though is like it was either before or after that he gave a press conference and he's like, yeah, I work with a he basically said, I work with a psychologist to help with performance. I have a psychologist I work with to help me with grief. I have another, like he had like 3 different people he worked with. So it was a really great example of leveraging a player at a very high level, a high performer, being an advocate. And then I think that ties into what Josh brought up earlier in the conversation of like leveraging the voices and advocates that you have in the organization. We try to tap into those guys who can then come and share with our new draft guys or even talk amongst their teammates. There's guys in a major league clubhouse that I know who are maybe less inclined to want to talk about the mental game, but they're sitting like we're in a conversation with somebody who is. And so I'll ask that other person the question. And then next thing you know, they get, dragged in or brought in or whatever term you want to use. But I think I think leveraging the advocates that you have in the locker room plays a really important point too. So I think those are all good points that others have already brought up in this conversation.
No, great points, guys. Any final comments on that questions before I wrap it up? No, but look, I want to thank you guys for your time today. It was a great conversation, and
Yeah, good conversation. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Julian.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Good to see you.